So today, Zach Budd is joining me, and we are going to be talking about the kinky question of the week, ghosting. This
Mm.
time, we're trying a new format. Obviously, I've got a guest today, so that's new. And we're going to talk this out together in addition to the additional information that I'll be adding at the end of this for when this all goes out on social media. So, Zach, tell us a little bit about yourself as we get started.
Okay, gosh, a little bit about myself. My name is Zach. You got that part down. I'm on FetLife. I'm known as Invictus, and I believe the same thing on Dating Kinky. I am polyamorous, kinky, sadistic, dom, top. I have multiple relationships. Some of them include a dynamic, some don't. I live here in my home, which I call ABM headquarters, which is the headquarters of the ABM Nation, and I live just southeast of the great city of Houston in the big state of Texas. By the way, I live on the ancestral homelands of the Akokisa, Atakapa, and Terenkawa tribes. Um, and while I'm at it, I'm going to send a shout out to the Chamorro people who are the indigenous Polynesian folks from the island, the beautiful island of my birth, also known as Guam. So yeah, that's about it. I am known as a consent educator. I also teach on things like human sexuality, consent kink in the law, and self-care. And yeah, my website is consentwarrior.com. And I'm always known for wearing pithy t-shirts, so don't ask unless you really want to know.
So, you mentioned real quick, you mentioned ABM headquarters. So, what does
Mhm.
ABM stand for?
ABM was a nickname I was given years ago called Angry Black Man, and it's kind of sort of stuck because I am a person who is known for having opinions, many of them. Usually they're pretty strong, and I will share them pretty forcefully. I actually started a podcast called the ABM Podcast, which is where I just kind of go and riff and rant about things that are on my mind. I'm always open to suggestions. I tell people this as we're about to get into this, where we're talking about various topics. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it. Just be prepared for the answer because sometimes I am not afraid to tell the truth, even if the truth is painful. I don't try to be mean, but I am straightforward, and I'm not known for sugarcoating things. So that's you kind of what you see is what you get with me, and I'll just sort of throw it out there. Not saying I've never been wrong; it just doesn't happen often, and you got to convince me that I'm wrong. I'm one of those people that will change my mind when the facts change. So there you go.
And this is exactly why we're doing this today. So, let's get started.
Okay.
Ghosting. Is it
Uh,
ever appropriate? And if so, when?
you're asking me. So it's funny. Ghosting feels like it's appropriate for the person who's ghosting at the time. It never feels appropriate for the person who's been ghosted. Um, is it ever appropriate? I don't like to use the word never because there are times, abuse, danger, safety, and whatnot. And the best thing to do is just fucking disappear. It's why the witness protection program exists. That being said, all those caveats aside, ghosting or being ghosted sucks for a couple of reasons. If you're in a relationship with somebody that you presumably care about and they just disappeared on you and did not give you the courtesy of being communicated with about, by the way, your relationship is ending, I mean, it's like snatching the rug out from under somebody. You get disoriented, you're like, what happened? I got ghosted once and went through that period of time where I spent 3 or 4 days trying to contact my partner and being like, but did I miss something or have they been kidnapped? And then you realize, no, they just kind of wanted to end the relationship. And you're like, well, why the fuck couldn't you just say, I mean, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Peace out. I mean, short, but that's better than ghosting, you know?
Sure.
Um, so, I mean, I guess I don't like to say never. I'll tell you this, it sucks. And I would always encourage people to try to find other options. Now, the flip side of that is sometimes people often say, well, the problem with ghosting is you don't get closure. And I always argue against that because I'm a firm believer that closure is something you give yourself. I mean,
Mhm.
you have to choose to walk away, and that's your closure. Because people can give you this long, drawn out, totally explanatory breakup, and you still don't have closure because for you, it doesn't feel like it's done, right? So
Right.
closure is something I think you give yourself. But I think ghosting, it's funny because whenever I wrote down the word ghosting, the next thing I wrote next to it was cowardice with a question mark
Mhm.
because I can understand some people wanting to just kind of opt out of a relationship and not deal with that person anymore. But, you know, it does seem like an easy way out. Again, I think a lot of it is very much based on circumstances. I hate being like that because I prefer solid answers, but never is a strong word. And I'm not ready to go there just yet. What do you think,
So,
though?
the thing that I find interesting is how the word ghosting is actually being used these days. Because the way that you're speaking is, to me, you're speaking from the perspective of an established, acknowledged relationship and somebody stepping away from that without any additional, so much as a buy your leave or thank you, so long and thanks for all the fish or anything like that, right? Um, Whereas I think that a lot of people are using ghosting for, hey, we were talking regularly for a week and a half and then they just disappeared. Or, what about for the online relationships where, maybe they've been talking for months every day and then all of a sudden they just disappear? Where
Yeah.
is the line there between ghosting and, eh, I just, I don't want to deal with you anymore?
I don't think those are mutually exclusive. You can just decide I don't want to deal with you anymore, but that could still be communicated.
Sure.
You can, again, ghosting is just randomly, no warning to me, you're just out. Now, you're right, you got a point there, especially in today, of COVID and so many Zoom virtual relationships. Hello, look at you and I just kind of chatting and whatnot. But, you can be regularly communicating with somebody virtually and then just all of a sudden, opt out. And it could be, I mean, there could be so many reasons why that happened. Everything from the mundane, somebody didn't pay a internet bill, or something came up, family things happen, to I just really don't want to talk to that person anymore. They said something that triggers me, and I'm out. Things like that is one of the reasons why I won't say it's never a good time to ghost because ultimately people have the right to maintain their own safety. I think in a lot of ways it is very much an individual thing. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem with that is when you make it, up to the individual whether or not ghosting is appropriate, it becomes way too easy to ghost and then justify it. So, I mean, the reality is like this: people have a right to be in or out of a relationship if they choose. They have a right to
Mm-hmm.
end it anytime they want, and they have a right to walk away from it and end that relationship anytime they want. That said, again, presumably you're in a relationship or some kind of connection, whatever dynamic, something with another person, who presumably you cared enough about to at least start having something going on. I mean, if it's somebody that I've, bumped into in some online, forum and we've talked for 3 days and then I don't hear from them again, not the biggest deal. If it's somebody I've been talking to for 6 months and we really start caring about each other and we start talking about, hey, one of these days when it's safe to travel and visit again, I'd love to come see you. We start planning our first, second, and third date, and then you disappear. Yeah, that stings a little bit because I mean, I would like to know what happened. But again, if it's a mental issue or like a mental health issue or a safety issue, they don't owe you the right to know what is going on. People have the right to deal with their
Sure.
own safety without having to give an explanation. So I can totally see both sides of this. As somebody who had to end a very long relationship with a abusive and narcissistic personality, I went zero contact. Now that being said, she was aware that the relationship was ending. It wasn't like I just dropped off the face of the earth, but
Mm-hmm.
I refused to answer the phone. Things like that because I had to move on. I had to give myself on to the next chapter of my life, and it didn't include
Right.
her. But that's not exactly ghosting. That's I'm getting the fuck out of here because you're nuts, and that was necessary. So, but even then, I didn't like it. I mean, there were attempts to try to contact or get at me from external sources, or trying to bait me into coming out and interacting again that I just didn't engage with, and eventually that person will get bored and move on. Um, So that might be as close as I've gotten to ghosting. It's funny, but has someone who's been ghosted where you just get somebody that just will not respond and they're not giving you anything, you don't know why. I mean, you have that period of time where you feel a little lost. I mean, you're really discombobulated. Then eventually you got to just stop pining for somebody that doesn't want to be there, you know, because, and I'm like that with all relationships. If you don't want to be there, if you don't want to be in a relationship with me, I'm not going to try to force you to stay. And convincing someone to not leave doesn't
Right.
necessarily fly for me, because if they're on the way out, they're on the way out. I mean, all you can do is maybe put a stopgap in it temporarily. So if somebody has decided to ghost, fine. I mean, you try a couple times to make sure they actually intended to just leave you in the lurch there, but at a certain point, protect yourself and move on. You don't want to end up being that person that is pining for months and months and months at a time for somebody who has moved the hell on. So,
So I think that ghosting in general is a dick move.
mm,
Um, I do believe that in early stages of relationships, especially non-negotiated relationships that are just sort of casual online, that there are many reasons to ghost and not deal with people. Like I posted the other day about how I set my boundaries, and I said to somebody, I simply don't have the time to put into this, developing whatever it is the way that you do. And I feel like every time I log on, if I have 3 or 4 messages from you with increasingly detailed information, I'm not here for this, right? Like
right.
I have to set my boundaries. And they came back at me with just one like nasty thing after another, right?
Mm,
Calling me
yeah.
like, that I have no kindness of heart, and telling me that I'm spoiled rotten, and that, like, obviously I'm just not as nice as I present myself to be, and whatever. And I
Mm,
think that many people have these types of experiences. And I won't say just women, although I think the majority of people I've heard this from are women, hearing it primarily from men. But it's not my experience that it's only me, or that it's only men that do this, because
yeah.
I've had that from all genders. However, for somebody who maybe is less resilient than I am for various reasons, they don't even want to risk the, going from, hey, you're beautiful, I'd like to get to know you, to, you're a fat cunt and nobody's going to love you ever, in,
Yeah.
one no. Right.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, ghosting, um, up, along a very relatively long track, would then be considered self care,
Yeah.
right? I
Absolutely.
mean,
Yeah.
even
It's
if
self
it's,
preservation. Yeah.
yeah, even if it's, the reply and block, a block only takes care of that particular online account. And as somebody who's been stalked online, so
Yeah.
um, so there's that. The other thing is, and I know we talked a little bit about this before, but to me, not communicating, especially not communicating as uh, definitely and concisely as ghosting, is a withdrawal of consent. It's a very clear communication. It takes a while to sink in,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it is a very clear communication.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, Ryan just posted in the chat the link to "You're Hot, No Thank You, Fuck You," which was a customer service parable. Me suggesting that people who are like that, people who are going to be like, "Oh, you're so hot," and then a woman says "No thank you," and then they're like, "Well, fuck you." Those are also the
Right.
types of people who are going to be hateful to customer service people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we
Yeah.
have a customer service policy that says, "Don't be an asshole to our customer service people, or we'll just kick you out."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and
but so there is
yeah.
that. I mean, and
Mhm.
and otherwise, though, I mean, I really think generally ghosting is a dick move,
Yeah.
right? It just is.
Yeah, well, and like what you're talking about there, where, in this virtual world, this online world, there's people that just, misbehave because they don't feel like they got the right response. I wouldn't necessarily call that ghosting. When you mentioned that, the
No,
first word I wrote down was entitlement next to what I wrote false. That's a false entitlement. That's, you owe me a
agreed.
communication. I called you beautiful. so you owe me pictures of your tits or some bullshit like that, which is ridiculous and not at all the truth. And this is, people who just don't get it. This is the problem with the virtual communication is it's made people more comfortable being assholes. And so you don't owe somebody anything. There's no such thing as fucking entitlement. Just because I saw you and gave you a compliment doesn't mean you owe me a couple hours of stimulating conversation, including a couple of pics of your ass, genitals, and nipples. I mean, that's not what that is. And so I don't consider that to be ghosting at all. That
Right.
is literally walking away from an asshole, withdrawing your consent from an asshole or disconnecting. Because, and not, let's be honest, that's not an established relationship
I agree.
because relationships are consensual interactions which involve two people. Just because I saw your pics and happen to like them and liked them a couple times and then send something like, hey, nice hip sexy, you and I don't suddenly have a relationship. I mean, maybe in my mind I do, but that's because I'm delusional, right? But that doesn't mean you therefore owe me an explanation of why you won't talk to me. And God damn it, I told you I love you. Why don't you want me to come visit you? And stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I certainly don't have the right to go create five more, online IDs so I can continue fucking with you and whatnot. The fact that I don't get it doesn't mean
Hmm.
that we therefore have a relationship. And those things are consensual. And again, it's just a basic lack of respecting other people's consent. Not to mention the fact that you have the right to decide if you want to interact with me or not. I don't send you one message and therefore you are by definition in obligation to me. And if you don't
Hmm.
respond the way I deem is right, therefore, I mean, or well, God, can I just give you a compliment? Well, yeah, you can. If you think that's a compliment, I don't necessarily think there's a compliment. Say something about a woman other than she's got a nice ass. Can you say something that has nothing to do with her physically, as a compliment?
Hmm.
But even then, even if I say, man, you've got the sexiest brain on the planet, you don't owe me anything. And it's that false entitlement. Yeah, I think what was said is absolutely correct. There's a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
People have to be. I mean, it's very easy to sit behind a keyboard and be an asshole and get indignant. I crack up because I'm horrendously nasty to people that do like that. Primarily because there are people online who aren't like that, and it becomes harder for those of us who do interact with people online to convince them that we're not that son of a bitch. So,
It's
and
true.
by the way, that isn't a complaint. That is me saying, the reason why we can't have nice things is because of these people. And it's why we have to work so hard to make sure we're having consensual interactions and whatnot. And
Hmm.
again, if somebody is ghosting you, that's not the time to get mad because they ghosted you. That's why I'm kind of a little cautious about saying it's a dick move because it is, but you have a right to make that dick move if
Right.
you deem so. I mean, it may be the absolute. I mean, again, I've been ghosted for bullshit reasons. I was in a relationship that lasted for 2 years and woke up one morning. Now, it wasn't really ghosting, but it was, this feels toxic to me. I'm out. And I'm like, all right. I mean, bullshit. I mean, you weren't not safe around me, but fine. Say what you need to say to make you, to help you sleep better. But the next step is for me to move on, not to come after that person because they owe me a better response than that. And I've had people do that too, where you end a relationship and they spend the next 3 months declaring to the world that you owe them something. And it's like, I mean, the only thing anybody could owe you right now is mental health care. But, but you have the right to leave a relationship, just like you have the right to decide if you're in one or not. All that is consent, basically. So yeah, dick moves are nasty because it's not a consensual breakup. And you
Yeah.
don't, and the thing is, you have to draw the conclusion that you've been broken up with, you know, but at the same time, that ghosting is something that people have the right to. I mean, we're adults here. So part of adulting is accepting the fact when you've been told no,
Yeah.
and
I
that's the
think I
conclusion.
think so to wrap this up, the key is a couple of things. First of all, you're not ghosted unless you have an established consensual relationship. First of
Correct.
all. Second of all, ghosting is generally not cool. However, only you really get to decide what you have to do to maintain your personal safety and mental goodness, right?
Hmm.
Um, Third, if you get ghosted or if anybody withdraws their consent to communication with you in any way, as frustrating as it is, getting angry is not as productive as getting clarity for yourself and moving forward.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and I would add, as the person getting ghosted, listen, it's not illegal. Move on. You have no recourse if somebody ghosts you. other than to
Right.
take care of yourself, be like, okay, for whatever reason, this person's like that. You can even say, well, that was a dick move. Why would I want to be in that connection with that person anyway? And then move the fuck on,
Yeah.
but you have no
Agreed.
recourse. You don't get to blast them all over, social media. This person is a ghoster. So what? They ghosted you. That doesn't mean they're going to ghost everybody, and there could be so many reasons. So yeah, I think I absolutely agree. Relationships are consensual. Everybody has the right to withdraw that consent at any time, and you have to respect the fact if someone withdraws their consent, however they do it. Quite frankly, I'd rather be ghosted than shot through the chest. But hey, there are different ways to go about ending
Well, aren't you
relationships.
high maintenance?
Yeah, a little bit, right? I mean, seriously. I don't know. I'd have to ask my partners if I'm high maintenance. I know I'm a lot of work, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm high maintenance. So
Truth.
um,
Truth.
there are some people I could ask whose opinions matter in that regard more than mine do. So yeah, overall, ghosting's a dick move. But there's nothing. I mean, there's no recourse. Just move on. If you've been ghosted, just move on. That's the best thing you can do for yourself. Find somebody who won't.